Welcome to Moonlit Romantic, your place for love stories told softly to ease your heart and carry you into rest. Tonight's story is The Last Bonfire. Every summer, Natalie Rivers came home to the lake house, to family laughter, to secret smiles with her first love, Jake Morgan, and to the bonfire that lit the night sky with sparks of forever. But years and distance pulled them apart. Now, after loss and time away, Natalie returns, ready to let go of her past. What she doesn't expect is the pull of memory, or the warmth of an old flame still burning steady by the water's edge. So settle in, breathe deep, and let this story of second chances guide you toward dreams. Chapter 1: Coming Home. The road to the lake had not changed much in all the years since Natalie Rivers last drove it. The asphalt still curved like a ribbon through the pine forest, and sunlight filtered through the branches in slanted golden shafts that reminded her of afternoons spent in the back seat. Bare feet sticking to the vinyl, windows rolled down so she could smell water before she saw it. She had taken this road countless times as a girl, summers measured not by calendars, but by the steady rhythm of arrivals and departures at the lake house. Her father would whistle tunelessly behind the wheel. Her mother would bring jars of lemonade for the drive, and she and her brother would press their faces to the glass the moment the first shimmer of blue appeared between the trees. Now she drove alone. The hum of the rental car's engine felt too modern, too practical compared to the humbler cars her family had packed to the brim years ago. The passenger seat held only a small overnight bag, though she had planned to stay for a week. Long enough, she told herself, to meet with a realtor, sort through what remained in the house, and sign the papers that would finally close this chapter. Natalie tightened her grip on the steering wheel. The truth was harder to admit, even to herself. She had not been back since her father's funeral 2 summers ago. The thought of the lake without him had been unbearable, so she had thrown herself into her work in the city, burying herself under deadlines and late nights. But now, the sale was inevitable. It was time. The forest thinned and the lake appeared as it always had. Quiet, glimmering, expansive. The surface caught the late afternoon light, painting it with silver streaks, and the gentle hush of waves lapped against the familiar shore. Her chest tightened. No matter how many years had passed, the sight of it still made her feel 8 years old again. Legs dangling off the dock, Jake Morgan sitting beside her with a fishing pole, far too big for either of them. Jake. She exhaled slowly at the memory. She had not thought she would, but of course his name came rushing back the moment she saw the lake. Jake, with his easy grin, his sun-browned hair always sticking up after swimming, his way of making her feel as though everything they did together, whether it was catching fireflies or sneaking out to watch the stars, was their own private secret. He had been her best friend, her first kiss, her first heartbreak, and she had left him behind. Natalie pressed the brakes gently as the car turned into the gravel driveway. The crunch under the tires sounded the same as it had when her father pulled up every June, announcing, "We're home." The lake house stood at the end of the path, weathered but dignified, its white paint faded to cream, its shutters peeling, but still a hopeful shade of green. The porch sagged a little more than she remembered, but the swing her father had built still hung, creaking in the breeze. She parked, killed the engine, and sat still for a moment. The air smelled of pine needles and lake water, earthy and clean. Cicadas buzzed lazily in the trees, and somewhere a loon called across the water. For a long moment, she closed her eyes and let the sounds wrap around her like a blanket. When she finally stepped out, the ground felt soft beneath her sandals. She carried her bag up the porch steps, each creak beneath her weight carrying memory. Inside, the house smelled faintly of cedar and dust, but beneath it lingered the comforting aroma of summers past, coffee brewed in the mornings, sunscreen rubbed on freckled arms, wood smoke drifting in through the windows. Her father's hat still hung on the peg by the door. Her throat tightened at the sight of it. She touched the brim lightly, as though greeting him. "Hi, Dad," she whispered. In the living room, sunlight slanted through the tall windows, illuminating shelves of books and old board games. The furniture was dated, but hers. The stone fireplace still bore the scorch marks from dozens of marshmallow roasts gone wrong. In the corner stood the upright piano her mother used to play on summer nights when everyone gathered to sing old folk songs. Natalie set her bag down and wandered through each room slowly, brushing her fingers across tabletops and picture frames. She found herself pausing at the dining table, where a faint ring from her father's coffee mug had never been sanded away. She sat in his chair and folded her hands, imagining him there, telling her about the importance of patience while fishing, or reminding her that books and the lake were both endless, and both worth loving. The realtor would arrive in 2 days, she reminded herself. She had a list of things to box, papers to sign, closets to sort, but tonight she would let the memories linger. Stepping onto the back porch, she faced the lake again. The dock stretched out, weathered but sturdy, a dark silhouette against the water. She walked to the edge, boards creaking softly beneath her, and sat down, pulling her knees to her chest. The sun hung low, painting the sky in the streaks of peach and lavender. The surface of the water shimmered, reflecting both color and memory. Natalie hugged her knees tighter. "I don't know if I can do this," she murmured, though there was no one to hear. But the lake listened, as it always had. She stayed there until the first stars appeared, then returned inside to make a cup of tea. The kettle was the same one her mother had used, slightly dented, but it whistled with familiar cheer. She carried her mug back to the porch swing and rocked gently, letting the tea warm her hands as the night deepened. From across the water came faint sounds, laughter, the crackle of a fire, the distant strum of a guitar. She knew them instantly. The camp. Her heart stirred. Every summer, the town's camp ended the season with a bonfire by the water. Everyone gathered, campers, counselors, townsfolk, to celebrate with stories, music, and sparks flying into the night sky. She had not been since high school, since the last summer she and Jake had spent together. That was the night they had made promises beneath the stars. promises that dissolved when she left for college in the city. She told herself she would not go. It was not her world anymore. But still, she listened to the sound of laughter drifting across the lake, and she knew deep down that when the night of the bonfire came, she would find her way there. The next morning, Natalie woke to sunlight spilling across the quilt. She rose slowly, stretching, then brewed coffee in the dented kettle. She carried it outside and sat on the dock once more, steam curling into the cool morning air. The water was glassy, broken only by the occasional ripple of a fish or the flight of a bird skimming low. It was then she saw movement on the opposite shore, campers gathering by the boathouse, counselors calling instructions. And there he was, Jake Morgan. He stood near the dock, tall and broad-shouldered, his hair still sun-streaked, though shorter now, his movements confident and sure. Even from this distance, she recognized him instantly. He was leading a group of children, his voice carrying just faintly across the water, his laugh unmistakable. Her chest ached. He looked older, steadier, but still entirely Jake. She took a deep breath, wrapping her hands tighter around her mug. She had come here to say goodbye to her father, to the lake house, to the summers she thought she had outgrown. But already, with the lake sparkling before her and Jake's laughter drifting across the water, she wondered if the summer had other plans. Chapter 2: Embers of the Past. Natalie spent much of the next morning wandering the lake house, opening cupboards and drawers that seemed to breathe memory. Every object had its own voice. The chipped enamel mugs that once carried cocoa after long swims, the mismatched set of playing cards with drawings her brother had added in pencil, the stack of towels that still smelled faintly of cedar from the old chest. She should have been sorting, boxing, organizing, but she found herself pausing more than she worked. Each time she tried to put something away, she was caught instead by the echo of a laugh, a voice, a moment. It was as if the house were gently insisting, "Slow down, remember." By afternoon, she decided she needed air beyond the walls. She laced her sandals and followed the narrow path through the pines that led toward the camp. It was a walk she had done 100 times as a child, sneaking away with Jake to watch campfires or borrow canoes when no one was looking. Her heart thudded in her chest as the familiar clearing opened before her. The camp looked almost the same. Clusters of wooden cabins, their shutters painted in cheerful blues and yellows, a flag fluttering by the main lodge, the faint scent of wood smoke from a fire still burning low. Children's laughter rang out across the field where a game of tag unfolded, shrieks of joy rising like birds. And there he was. Jake Morgan stood at the edge of the field, calling encouragement, his posture relaxed, but his presence unmistakable. He wore a faded green t-shirt and khaki shorts, his hair sun-browned and curling slightly at the edges. His voice carried deep and steady, punctuated by that laugh she remembered so well, the one that seemed to ripple outward and make everyone nearby feel part of the joke. For a moment, she stayed still, half hidden in the shade of the trees, simply watching. Time folded on itself, and she was 16 again, standing beside him as they planned their escape for an evening canoe ride. She was 18, sitting on the dock with his arm brushing hers, promising she'd write from college. She was 22, crying alone when letters slowed, when phone calls grew shorter, when the space between them became too wide to bridge. Natalie took a breath and stepped into the sunlight. "Jake," she called, her voice carrying more tremor than she expected. He turned. For a heartbeat, he didn't move, as though disbelief had rooted him to the spot. Then his face broke into a smile, slower, more measured than the boyish grin she remembered, but warmer, steadier. "Natalie Rivers," he said, crossing the field toward her. His voice wrapped around her name, like it always had, as though he was tasting it for the first time. She laughed softly, nerves spilling out in the sound. "I guess some things don't change. You still call me by my full name. And you still appear when I least expect it," he replied, stopping just a few feet away. Up close, she saw the faint lines at the corners of his eyes, not unkind, but earned by summers in the sun and years of responsibility. "What are you doing back here?" Natalie hesitated. "I came to take care of the lake house. Sell it, actually." Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe disappointment, but he covered it with a nod. "That must feel strange." "It does," she admitted. "I thought it would be easy." "It isn't." They stood in silence for a moment, the sounds of children playing filling the space between them. Natalie studied him, the way he stood solidly on the earth as though he had grown roots here. He studied her too, his gaze gentle but searching. "You look," Jake began, then chuckled, shaking his head. "You look the same and not the same, grown, but still you." She felt her cheeks warm. "And you've hardly changed at all. Still Jake Morgan, camp director extraordinaire." He laughed. Director, handyman, counselor, lifeguard, peacemaker. Depends on the day. Depends on the crisis. "I suppose someone has to keep this place running," she teased lightly. "Someone does," he agreed. Then, after a pause, "Want to see it?" She blinked. "See the camp?" "Yeah," he said. "Properly. A tour. For old time's sake." Her chest tightened, but she nodded. "I'd like that." Jake led her along the familiar paths. Children waved as they passed, some shouting his name, others clinging to his arm. He responded with patience and humor, clearly beloved by everyone. Natalie couldn't help but watch the way he knelt to tie a camper's shoelace, the way he listened earnestly when a child explained a rule for a made-up game. "This hasn't changed either," she said softly when they were alone again. "You always had a way with people, even when we were kids. Everyone followed you." Jake shrugged, though his expression softened. "I just like seeing people happy. Simple as that." They stopped at the boathouse, where canoes were stacked neatly, and the smell of lake water and varnish lingered. Natalie touched the worn wood of a paddle, memory flooding her of nights gliding across still water. Jake's laughter echoing in the dark. "You remember?" he asked quietly. "Of course," she whispered, I remember everything. Their eyes met, the weight of unspoken history pulling tight between them. For a moment, she thought he might reach for her hand. Instead, he gestured towards the dock. "Come on, let's sit a while." They settled at the end of the dock, legs dangling over the water. The lake stretched before them, shimmering with late afternoon light. Natalie hugged her knees, the way she always used to, and Jake leaned back on his palms, relaxed, as though they had never left this spot. "So," he said, voice lighter now, "city life treating you well?" "It keeps me busy," she replied. "Work, meetings, deadlines. I barely stop moving." He studied her a moment. "Do you like it?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. Finally, she said, "I thought I did. I thought leaving meant becoming who I was supposed to be. But lately, I'm not sure." Jake nodded slowly. "I know what that's like." "You?" she asked, surprised. "I thought you were perfectly content here." His smile was wistful. "I am, most of the time. But there were years after you left, when I wondered if I'd made the wrong choice, staying. I thought maybe I should have chased bigger things too. Then the camp needed me, and little by little, it became home in a way I can't imagine leaving behind." Natalie's throat tightened. "So we both stayed loyal to different places." "Maybe," he said softly. "Or maybe we just stayed loyal to who we are." The sun dipped lower, painting the water in molten gold. For a long while, they sat in silence, watching ripples catch the light. Natalie felt a comfort she hadn't known in years, a sense of belonging that wrapped around her like the lake breeze. As they rose to leave, Jake touched her arm gently. "The bonfire's tomorrow night," he said. "You should come." Her heart skipped. "I don't know if—" "You should," he said again, firmer this time. "It's tradition. And besides," his eyes held hers, "I'd like to see you there." She nodded, unable to trust her voice. That evening, Natalie returned to the lake house and stood on the porch, looking across the water. The campfire had already begun to crackle on the opposite shore, faint sparks rising into the twilight. She could almost hear the voices drifting over, the guitar, the laughter. And she thought of Jake's steady eyes, his warm voice, the way sitting beside him had felt like no time had passed at all. Her father had always said that some places never really let you go. Maybe some people didn't either. She wrapped her arms around herself, the night air cool against her skin, and whispered into the quiet tomorrow. Chapter 3. Firelight Confessions. The night of the bonfire arrived draped in the kind of golden light that seemed to belong only to late summer. The air was warm, but laced with the faint coolness that whispered of autumn, waiting patiently in the wings. Natalie dressed slowly, choosing a soft sweater over her dress, something she could tug close against the evening breeze. She caught her reflection in the mirror, older, steadier, yet with a flicker of the girl who had once rushed to the fire with sand still clinging to her toes. The path to the camp was alive with people, families from the town, counselors shepherding children, couples carrying blankets, all moving toward the clearing where the fire had already begun to roar. Sparks leapt skyward, swirling into the deepening twilight, while the smell of wood smoke curled through the air like a remembered song. Natalie paused at the edge of the clearing, her heart racing. She had stood in this spot so many summers ago, always with Jake at her side, always with the feeling that the night ahead might carry something magical. Tonight, she felt the same anticipation, though heavier with years and longing. Thought you might come. The voice was warm, steady. She turned, and there he was. Jake stood a few steps away, hands in his pockets, the firelight painting his features in shades of amber and shadow. "You invited me," she reminded him, her voice softer than she intended, "and you listened." His smile was slow, almost cautious, but his eyes carried the same spark she remembered. "Come on, let's sit." He led her toward a spot on the sand where logs had been rolled into a loose circle. Children darted past, waving sticks crowned with marshmallows, their laughter rising above the crackle of the fire. Teenagers huddled in clusters, whispering secrets, and older couples leaned against each other, content. The bonfire was not just an event. It was the town's heartbeat, one she realized she had missed without knowing it. They settled on a log near the water's edge, the fire warming their faces, while the lake mirrored the flames in restless ripples. For a while, they said nothing, simply watching the sparks scatter upward and vanish into the night. "Do you remember our first bonfire together?" Jake asked suddenly. Natalie laughed softly. "Of course I do. I was 12. You were 13. You dared me to jump over the smallest flame, and I singed the hem of my shorts. You were fearless," he said, grinning. "I was reckless," she corrected, but the memory made her smile. "And you panicked. You poured your soda on me to put it out." He laughed, the sound carrying easily over the fire. "It worked, didn't it?" "It did," she admitted. Their laughter faded into a silence that felt less awkward now, more like a pause in music. Around them, voices rose in song as someone strummed a guitar, the melody simple and familiar. Natalie leaned her chin on her knees, letting the music wash over her. Jake's voice came low. "I missed this, sitting with you, talking like no time passed." Her heart tightened. She glanced at him, saw the firelight reflected in his eyes, and felt the weight of all the years between them. "I missed it too," she said honestly. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Jake leaned back slightly, his gaze drifting toward the stars overhead. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't left?" The question hung between them, raw and unguarded. Natalie swallowed hard, all the time. He looked at her, surprised. "I thought about it constantly in those first years," she admitted, her voice trembling. "Every letter I sent, every phone call we tried to make work, I wondered if staying would have been better. But I had this dream, this picture of who I thought I needed to be, and I thought the only way to get there was to leave." Jake nodded slowly, his jaw tight. "And I couldn't leave. Not then. My family needed me here. The camp needed me. I know, she said softly. I never blamed you. I blamed myself, he confessed, for letting you go without fighting harder, for not finding a way to follow you. Her eyes burned. Jake. He shook his head gently. No, don't worry. I don't regret staying. This place, it's in my blood. I've built a life here, a good one. But I regret how we ended, or didn't end. We just unraveled. Natalie's throat tightened. It never felt finished to me. His hand shifted on the log between them, close enough that she could feel the heat of it, even over the fire's warmth. It didn't to me either. The guitar faded into laughter as someone told a story. Children darted closer to the fire, their shadows long against the sand. The night carried on around them, but for Natalie and Jake, time seemed to still. You remember that last night? She asked quietly. Before I left? On the dock, he said immediately, as though the memory lived at the surface of his mind. You kissed me, she whispered. You kissed me back, he replied. She smiled faintly, blinking back tears. We promised it wouldn't be the end. Jake exhaled slowly. And maybe it wasn't. Their eyes held, the ears between them shrinking until all that remained was the firelight, the water, and the familiar rhythm of being near each other. Natalie's pulse quickened, not with the giddy thrill of youth, but with something deeper. Recognition, belonging, a love that had matured quietly in the shadows of memory. Jake, she said softly, I don't know what I'm doing here. I came back to sell the house, to close that part of my life. But now, she trailed off, overwhelmed. Now you're not so sure, he finished gently. She nodded, her throat too tight for words. Jake's hand shifted again, and this time it found hers. His fingers were warm, calloused, steady. She let herself hold on, just as she had so many summers ago. The fire crackled, sending sparks spiraling upward. Voices sang, laughter rang out, and the stars watched in silence. And Natalie thought, perhaps this was not an ending after all. Perhaps beneath the weight of memory and the glow of firelight, it was the beginning of something new. Later, when the bonfire had burned lower and families began to drift away, Jake walked her back along the path towards the lake house. The night was cool, the air scented with pine and smoke. Their hands remained linked, neither of them willing to break the fragile, newfound connection. At the edge of her porch, they paused. The house loomed quietly behind her, the lake stretching silver before them. Thank you, she whispered. For what? He asked. For tonight, for remembering. He squeezed her hand. Some things are impossible to forget. They stood in silence a moment longer. Then Jake leaned down and pressed a soft kiss to her forehead. Good night, Natalie Rivers. Her heart swelled, full of ache and promise all at once. Good night, Jake. As he walked back toward the camp, his figure swallowed by the trees, Natalie stood on the porch, hand still tingling where his fingers had held hers. The embers of the bonfire still glowed faintly across the water, a reminder that even when flames burned low, warmth remained. And she thought maybe her father had been right. Some places never truly let you go. Some people didn't either. Chapter 4. A New Flame. Morning light spilled through the lake house windows, soft and golden, gilding the worn floorboards and the dust motes floating in the air. Natalie woke slowly, the echoes of last night still stirring in her chest. The firelight, the songs, Jake's hand in hers, the kiss he'd pressed to her forehead, as if sealing a promise. Neither of them had spoken. She lay still for a long while, listening to the lake's hush outside. A loon called across the water. Somewhere down the shoreline, she could faintly hear children laughing, the camp already alive with activity. The sounds wrapped around her like a blanket, and for the first time since she'd returned, she didn't feel like a visitor. She felt home. But then her gaze fell on the folder that lay on the dining table downstairs, the realtor's papers neatly stacked, waiting for her signature. The weight of her decision pressed against her heart. She had come here to let go, and yet every moment since her arrival had reminded her how much she still belonged to this place, and to him. By mid-morning, Natalie found herself back on the dock, knees drawn to her chest, toes trailing in the water. She turned over the choice again and again in her mind. The city offered her stability, recognition, the career she'd worked so hard for. But the lake offered something different, something quieter, but no less real. Memory, belonging, roots. Thought I might find you here. She looked up. Jake stood at the edge of the dock, hands in his pockets, the sun glinting off the water behind him. His shirt was damp at the hem, as though he'd just finished helping with the morning swim. Some things don't change, she said softly. He lowered himself onto the dock beside her, his presence easy, familiar. For a while, they sat in silence, listening to the lapping water. Finally, Jake spoke. You were quiet last night when I walked you home. She smiled faintly. I had a lot to think about. Like what? Like how I came here, ready to sell the house and leave this place behind. And how now, I'm not so sure. Jake's eyes softened, but he said nothing, letting her continue. I thought the city was the only place I could be myself, she admitted. But sitting by the fire last night, holding your hand, it felt like I found a part of me I'd left behind, and I don't know how to reconcile the two. He leaned back on his palms, looking out over the lake. I know what it's like to feel split between two worlds. When you left, I thought maybe I should too. But every time I considered it, something here called me back. This place isn't just where I work. It's who I am. These kids, this camp, the lake, it's my life. I know, she whispered, and I wouldn't want you to give it up. Jake turned his gaze to her, steady and unflinching. Then the question is, can we find a way to fit our lives together, even if they look different? Her heart tightened. You'd really want that? After all these years? I've wanted that since the day you left, he said simply. It just took me a while to believe we might get another chance. Tears stung her eyes. She laughed softly, shaking her head. We're older now. Life isn't as simple as it was when we were 16. No, he agreed. But maybe it's better. Maybe we know enough now to make it last. The words settled into her chest, like embers glowing back to life. She looked out at the water, at the sunlight glittering across its surface, and imagined a future not divided between past and present, but woven together. That evening, Jake walked with her through the camp once more. The bonfire pit was quiet now, only a circle of ash and a few half-burned logs left behind. The laughter and music of the night before had been replaced with the gentle hum of crickets and the soft rustle of leaves. It always looks smaller the morning after, Natalie said, smiling faintly. Jake nodded, but the warmth lingers. They sat on a log, the same spot they'd shared the night before. Natalie drew in a breath, gathering courage. I don't know yet what I'll do about the lake house. Maybe I'll keep it. Maybe I'll sell. But I do know this. She turned to him, her eyes shining. I don't want to lose you again. Jake's expression softened into something both tender and certain. You won't. Not this time. He reached for her hand, and she gave it willingly, their fingers intertwining. The simple gesture felt like a promise, stronger than any vow they had made as teenagers. The sun slipped lower, painting the lake in shades of pink and gold. Jake leaned closer, his voice quiet. Natalie Rivers, may I kiss you properly this time? Her laugh caught in her throat, half tear, half joy. Yes, Jake Morgan, you may. His lips met hers softly, gently, like the first spark of a flame. It wasn't the hurried, breathless kiss of youth, but something deeper, steadier, two lives finding their rhythm again. When they finally pulled apart, the world felt both new and familiar. Natalie rested her forehead against his. Maybe the last bonfire isn't the end, she whispered. Maybe it's the beginning, he murmured back. They stayed there until the stars emerged, one by one, until the lake mirrored the sky, and until they felt certain that this, whatever shape it took, was worth holding on to. The next morning, Natalie sat at the dining table, the realtor's folder open before her. The pen rested in her hand, but she didn't write. Instead, she closed the folder, gently, and set it aside. She wasn't ready to let go. Not yet. Through the window, she saw Jake walking toward the dock, waving as he passed. She smiled, a warmth blooming in her chest. The decision didn't need to be final today. For the first time in years, she had no urge to rush, no deadline to chase. Some stories didn't end at goodbye. Sometimes the story began again, at the last bonfire. Thank you for spending this evening with Moonlit Romantic. For Natalie and Jake, the bonfire was never just tradition. It was a reminder that some places never truly let you go, and some loves never truly fade. If the last bonfire brought you peace tonight, we invite you to subscribe and return for more stories that carry love into the quiet hours. Until next time, rest easy. dream deeply, and remember, the heart always knows its way home.